The name Ghana, found by Dr. Dankwa, was used as the new name for the new nation. Independence was achieved and Dr. Nkrumah became the first Prime Minister of the Republic of Ghana.
I, Kwame Nkrumah, do solemnly swear that I will well and truly exercise the functions of the high office of President of Ghana. So help me God.
The black star of Africa unfurls.